Click on record. Good morning, it's Celeste Carmichael, and I'm here with Keith Tidball. Really excited to bring to you today a Campus County Connection webinar focused on serving military families and veterans in New York State. Just a couple of questions for you. I want to just ask you to bring your chat up because that's how we'll be communicating today. Just because this is in the webinar format. Otherwise, we'd be welcoming some dialogue and participation in that way. But this is set up as a webinar, and in Zoom, that means that our participants have to chat. So I want to encourage you to open up your chat, ask questions, comment on things, just so we have a little bit of dialogue and back and forth. So with that, my first question is, in the chat, could you add yes or no, whether or not you participated in a similar webinar that we held as a part of the system conference in April? So just if you could just, a simple yes or no would work, help us to know who all may have heard parts of this presentation in the past. Okay, so Carrie says no. That means that we've got at least one newbie here, right? No, I did not. Okay, there's two. Thank you, Dana. Anyone else? Anyone participate in the April conference webinar about serving military families and veterans? Okay, good. Very good. Super. All right, thanks, folks. Okay, with that, Keith, I'm going to turn it right over to you if you want to do just a brief introduction first, and then we'll get started on our content.
Hi, everybody. This is Keith Tidball here from the Department of Natural Resources and from Cornell Cooperative Extension, where I am happy to be in a somewhat new position, which is Assistant Director for Military Families, Veterans, and Disaster Education. For some of you that may not know this, I'm a veteran myself. I've been with Cooperative Extension for about 15 years, started in Ontario County, and have been here on campus since 2003. And I'm very excited about this subject today for a number of reasons. Probably most important to you all is that there's a great opportunity here to expand our programming with new audiences that really need this kind of program that Cooperative Extension can offer. So I'm going to start with just sort of setting the stage and asking you some questions about what you may or may not be aware of, at least in terms of the demographics that we might be addressing here in New York State. So, and if you want to chime in with any questions on this, feel free, but I wonder how many of you knew that we have nearly 900,000 veterans in this state. And interestingly, about 70% of those have served during periods of combat. This number here, 88,000, is actually growing to over 100,000 now, New Yorkers who've served in Afghanistan and Iraq over the last 12 years of activities there in the Middle East. The state is home to 30,000 active duty military personnel, as well as another 30,000 National Guard and Reserve folks. We have the fourth largest number of veteran-owned small businesses in the country, and I think that's an opportunity for Cornell Cooperative Extension to contribute in some significant ways. The largest military base in the Northeast, Fort Drum, up there in Jefferson County, who we collaborate with quite a lot. And Fort Drum is home to 18,000 soldiers, an additional 18,000 military family members, and another 4,000 civilian employees in our sort of larger military family there.
Those are all very impressive statistics there. I don't know, I'm wondering if of the folks that are on, if anybody is doing any current work with military families or veterans. If you could just chat that in, that would be helpful.
That'd be great. The other statistic here that I think is important to point out is that in the Guard, in the New York Army, Air, and National Guards, we've got another 16,000 men and women, and those individuals are something that Cooperative Extension should pay a lot of attention to, in my opinion, because they're geographically distributed. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. They're in all of our counties. We'll talk a little bit how we can work to reach those audiences. So with those giant demographics, and I think that it's significant that we go through that so you all see the magnitude of what's actually out there for us to work with, that's a pretty significant mountain to climb. And for us today, the goal is to learn how we can expand our Cornell Cooperative Extension programming to address this opportunity, this mountain before us that is going to be a challenge to climb, but will also provide us some tremendous rewards if we take on that challenge. So that's what we're going to work on today. And I think in order to do that, we need to think about how we might prepare to take on something like that. And that's an important piece of the puzzle that I always recommend when it comes to extension programming, is we really need to take the time to prepare. So the first thing we need to do is learn the lingo. Then we need to figure out how we can embrace this role, this audience. Then we need to assemble some tools or find out what's available to us in terms of resources. Then we need to spend some time actually locating and understanding our audience. And then we need to go for it. So in the remaining minutes, I'm going to go through each of these steps in terms of preparation, and hopefully at the end of this webinar, people will be more comfortable and ready to ask some questions. So if there are no questions now, I don't see any, let's get started with preparations. First, and here is an interactive portion, we need to learn the lingo. There's a lot of jargon. Most of you have seen lots of jargon if you pay any attention to the news within the military community. Lots of acronyms, lots of jargon. In the chat pod there, who would like to tell me what DoD means? I hope this is an obvious one, but you never know. Here's Casey talking about Jefferson County and 4-H military educator. We've got a couple of people working with this kind of program up there in Jefferson County we're very happy about, including Mitch. Working on Military Families Learning Network, which we'll talk about too. Very glad that you're here. Who knows about readiness? The Department of Defense is the answer to DoD. Readiness is an important component of this as well, and we're going to talk and unpack that term a little bit. Anyone? Readiness? While you think about that term, what about community capacity? What might community capacity mean in the context of military families and veterans? You're welcome to chime in anytime as we proceed with these terms. Then there's this term I mentioned a minute ago, geographically dispersed. This is something we're going to unpack as well, because it's an important and sort of underserved, underappreciated, people are not even necessarily aware of the geographically dispersed military community that's out there in our communities. And then there's this concept of total force fitness. Now here's a little caveat. Some of these slides are going to be a little word heavy, and the reason for that is because we want you to be able to go back to them and be able to remember what I said, and be able to take those and cut and paste some of that language into other documents that you may generate with my assistance or without. So stay tuned for the first of our definitions, the Department of Defense. What I want to do is, when sort of defining the Department of Defense, I want to define it in a way that's best suited to us here in Cooperative Extension, and that is, what is the relationship with the Department of Defense and the United States Department of Agriculture? Thankfully, there is a great relationship, and that is formalized in the proclamation, which is an MOU you see to the left. That is the Department of Defense, Department of Agriculture Extension Military Partnership, signed at the highest levels. So what that means is there is a clear mandate from those entities that are sort of the mothership, if you will, for a lot of the activities that we do, in order to leverage what we're already known for in cooperative extension as a national system, and certainly as a state system. And that's to facilitate investing in developing, refining, and deploying our cooperative extension service in this area of family readiness. So I hope this is new and encouraging information for many of you, that at that very highest level, there is this handshake already in place that gives us the green light to pursue this work and to actually leverage some additional resources in order to do that. The next term I mentioned was readiness. This notion is super important, as we've been in conflict mode for 12 years, basically. Family readiness is super important for that deployed soldier, sailor, airman, Marine to be able to be effective and to be able to come home. The definition is the state of being prepared to effectively navigate the challenges of daily living experienced in the unique context of military service. So how do you know readiness when you see it? It's about families being knowledgeable about the challenges they're going to face, and then being equipped to face those challenges. Most of which, those challenges, the equipage that we're talking about, are things that cooperative extension is already doing, including mobility and financial readiness. That should sound familiar to some of us. Deployment and mobilization readiness, personal and family life readiness, and there's a huge emphasis right now on veterans returning from rotating out of combat zones to get involved in agriculture, natural resources career, and those kinds of things. So all kinds of opportunities here to be thought about and brainstormed about as we consider programming in this domain. I mentioned community capacity. The definition that we're working towards on that is the performance in the context of opportunity, adversity, and positive challenges. It has to do with social networks. It has to do with collaboration. It has to do with making sure that the baseline capacity or resources in a community are accessible by those who need them most. And again, I think building awareness about cooperative extension among our military families is a key way to do that. So that's about the community capacity building. And in that sense, we're gonna build on those informal networks and formal systems to work together to achieve results for our community members, those we serve in cooperative extension. Important point to remember about community capacity building, something that cooperative extension is involved with every day, is that it's initiated by people in the community. It can't come from the top down. It has to come from the community within which we're trying to work, especially true in military families and the military community. And so when informal networks, like all your stakeholders in the various ways in county associations, for example, how they work together with the county association and how we work with formal networks here at Cornell and upwards, it's when those things collaborate, the informal and formal networks, that we really see some change and some growth and some positive resilience enhancing sorts of outcomes. Finally, in terms of terms, we've got this notion of geographically dispersed. Keep in mind that during Operation Desert Storm, the reservists, if you will, were about 25% of the deployed force. Now, with Iraq and Afghanistan, with Operation, well, there's a number of them. There's probably 7 different operational names now since we've been deployed in the Middle East. We're looking at more on the order of 50% of the deployed service men and women in theater are reservists and National Guards. That's your doctors, lawyers, shop owners, and so forth in your local town are suddenly over there. So the way this has changed is significant in that these individuals don't have a lot of the sort of resources around a post or an installation like they did back in the Desert Storm days. They're looking to their local community to provide those things. And in our eyes here, that means that they could and should be looking towards Cornell Cooperative Extension for some of the things that might traditionally be available in a military post or installation. And this slide is to remind us that these individuals that are deployed for 1 year and sometimes longer deployments, their primary occupation isn't being a soldier, a sailor, or a Marine, or an airman. And their families don't necessarily even consider themselves military families until they suddenly become one. And that goes back to that notion of preparedness and family readiness. And again, they're not located near a military installation, which has implications for their access to resources, which Cornell Cooperative Extension can alleviate somewhat. And this suddenness, this last point, that the family identity changes from civilian family to a military family with one letter or one phone call is important for us to recognize in terms of the implications at the community level. So I did mention this notion of total force fitness. I don't think this morning I'm going to go greatly in depth on this. I just want you to understand that the military community, this is the last of the DoD or the sort of military jargon terms. The military community thinks about fitness now in a way that they didn't used to think about it. They think about it as the sum total of the many facets of individuals. And in thinking that way, they're talking about this paradigm of 8 domains. And I want to just quickly show you, and you'll be able to look at these again more in depth later, but I want to show you how some of these domains match up with cooperative extension work. The total force fitness domains are those things down the left-hand column there in white on a gray background. And then on the right are cooperative extension aspects of cooperative extension programming that match up directly to these total force fitness domains. And again, we don't need to read these slides verbatim right now, but I think the point to take away here is that the cooperative extension capacity in our programming areas do match up directly to those. I'm noticing that this slide may be an older version of this slide deck. So there's some other lingo that's out there that's not covered here, including a whole bunch of acronyms that you may run into as you start to work with military families and veterans. Don't worry about that. There's a link right here that will help you with some of those terms if you run into them. I'm always available to help too. And then there's the Dictionary of Military Abbreviations written by Palmer, Warman, Wertheim that you can check out. So don't let the acronym soup ever discourage you from working with this audience. The acronyms are no problem to navigate, and I'm happy to help out, and those resources are available. Yeah, this is definitely a difference deck. Okay, so we've you can see down there in the left-hand corner, we've explored the lingo. Now it's time to embrace this role, as we said. That was the second step in preparation. So let's look at that. And I think the first thing for us to do is to remember that as a member of Cooperative Extension, we've actually always had a close relationship with America's military. It's not like this is new territory. What's happened is we may have, as a system, had some collective amnesia about what we might do with that relationship. And now I think is a wonderful time to revisit that, given that we've got so many veterans and military families now rotating back and looking to Cooperative Extension and others to help them in their efforts to build their own capacity and ability to basically reconnect and to reintegrate into communities that we live in and work in. And to sort of further talk about that a little bit, let's look at this. This is a map on the left of military installations throughout the United States. And here I'm just arguing for this clear relationship structurally. On the right is the 106 land-grant universities. And you can see that wherever there are military installations, we've got pretty good coverage with land-grant universities, which has implications for Cooperative Extension. I just want that to sink in for a little bit in terms of this handshake we mentioned with that MOU. And then if we think about that, drill down to New York State, on the left, you'll see all of the military installations that are part of our Department of Military and Naval Affairs. And just as an aside, Cooperative Extension is pretty familiar and used to working with our New York State Department of Ag and Markets, DEC, Human Health. We don't really work that much with the New York State Department of Military and Naval Affairs, but here you see on the left all of their installations. And interestingly, if you compare that to the right, which is where all of our Cooperative Extension offices are, they match up pretty well. And we're not, at this time, leveraging those relationships in ways that might benefit both the Department of Military and Naval Affairs in New York State and Cooperative Extension. So that's a little something to think about too as we move forward. Given that, what might be our role? And that's a question that I'm going to pose to you and give you an opportunity to chime in here a little bit if you'd like. Given what you've seen so far, before I start getting prescriptive, if you will, what do you think, based on what you've seen so far, is your role? And I'm watching the chat pod. And I will take this brief pause to have a little sip of water while I see what y'all are typing.
So go ahead and type in your thoughts, suggestions on what your role might be, how your community and Cooperative Extension could work together in response to these needs. And, you know, even if you're not, you may have some, this may be some new ideas, so it may not be completely clear, but just think through what you might be able to do and what your role might be, and type that in if you would.
Yeah, exactly. And we're going to talk about, in terms of that, providing parent education. There's a Cornell Cooperative Extension System relationship with a larger national program called the Military Families Learning Network that has some opportunities for you if you're interested in that area to work in. So we'll talk about that. Thanks, Dina. That's a great call. Anybody else have any ideas? While you're thinking about that and adding to the chat, I'm going to advance a slide here and talk a little bit about what our role can be in the broad sense. And again, heavy text warning. There's a reason this is all here, and this is for you to refer back to it. The first thing to think about in terms of roles for Cooperative Extension educators and associations is to encourage the participation of these military families and veterans in our local community programming. We can do all kinds of things like notifying military personnel, including commanders at all those installations I put up, or family community service center directors. There's lots of those. Each county has usually a Veterans Affairs officer who probably doesn't know enough about cooperative extension and how it can help. All of that in terms of role can be a part of this larger basket, if you will, or bucket of encouraging participation in local community programs. So that's one role. Another is to provide this sort of consultation role. Extension educators and extension associations can use their land-grant connection, use their campus-to-county connection, if you will, to provide faculty expertise to whatever programs are going on military installation, or new programs, or new opportunities for programming. And the campus-county connection was a wonderful thing to leverage in order to do that, and I'm happy to help in that domain. Other things we can do is we can do workshops for installation personnel. We can train military volunteer leaders. We can help to purchase the educational resources and staff time with the DoD, and they've got a budget. The Department of Defense and these state departments of military and naval affairs have budget. They need staff, they need good ideas, they need creativity, they need energy. And as Cornell Cooperative Extension evolves and looks for new direction in terms of programming areas and perhaps new audiences, which mean sustainable funding, this is something to consider. Another role is sharing resource materials. I mentioned that briefly in the slide prior. The military folks that are working with families are often interested in using the extension resources that we have, publications, audiovisuals, our social media networks. They just need to know, they need a warm handshake. They need to know how to connect up. And that's part of what you can do by taking advantage of this new program here at Cornell Cooperative Extension on campus, which will help you make those warm handshakes so that you can share these resources and materials. I am still watching that chat pod for anybody that's still thinking about what you might want to do. Also, this notion of delivering special programs. There are some military installations, and Fort Drum is a great example of this, that partner with Extension and even locate one or more Extension educators right there on post to help facilitate programs for the military personnel at that post and families. Now, that's a model that's awesome. Jefferson County is doing a great job with that. We have West Point. We have all those other installations. We may not be able to scale in all these other counties where those installations are to the extent that Jefferson County is doing, but we can certainly replicate that model. And I think there's huge opportunities to do that. One of my personal goals programmatically is to see more of that happen here in New York State. And I'm anxious to hear from some of you who might be interested in partnering with me to do that. And then are these, in terms of imagining your role, is to be an entrepreneur and think about what the opportunities for collaboration may be. There are the common concerns among this military community have to do with readiness, families' readiness to handle deployment, which seem to be more and more frequent, and retention. The U.S. military needs to be able to hang on to people, and in order to do that, they need to be sure, man or woman that's deployed needs to be sure that back home there's quality child care, there's employability of their spouses, and it is, as it says here, widely accepted among the military community that a service member's overall satisfaction and perhaps even their survival is directly related to their perceptions that the needs of the family are being met back home. A great mission area for Cornell Cooperative Extension to contribute to. So, if we think about what program areas we're used to working in, and we envision ourselves as having a role with military families, military youth, veterans, then the stuff that is normal to us should be pretty obvious as applicable. Our 4-H youth development work, our child care, our family caregiving, family life education, food safety, food security, all of this stuff, we don't have to reinvent the wheel at all. Our programming is already tailored. We just need to be able to get that warm handshake into these new audiences in order to address the military families and veterans' needs for community capacity building, especially the geographically dispersed communities that are out there in all of our counties. So now that we've talked a little bit about the lingo, and hopefully everybody has, passed their DoD 101 or military lingo 101, and we've talked a little bit about embracing the role and are comfortable now that, no, we're not wading into some foreign space. This is actually very, very comfortable and familiar territory for us to just basically use what we already do and apply it to a new audience. Now let's talk about how we might do that using some tools. What tools are available? Let's assemble some of those. And I'm going to share with you some stuff that I hope is exciting to you. The first is this area I mentioned, this new Cornell Cooperative Extension Veterans and Military Families Focal Area. Our vision, my vision certainly, is to have this focal area serve two missions. One is to serve as a clearinghouse for information about whatever is existing in extension for these audiences. Now, that's not just Cornell Cooperative Extension. I have my Periscope up across the cooperative extension system in the US. And if there's stuff that's relevant to us here in New York, you're going to hear about it on our website, our Facebook, our Twitter, and other social medias, as well as our listserv. And the second thing we want to serve as, in addition to that clearinghouse of information, is as an incubator for the development of new and expanded extension programming right here in New York. And we're already starting to do some of that work in the farming domain and in the sort of outdoor recreation as therapy domain. So there's some interesting opportunities in the incubator right now, and I want to see more participation in the newly formed program work team, which we'll talk about again in a minute, to help us think through what some new activities could be. So given that focal area, we want to guard and grow this expanding collection or library of evidence-based gold standard extension education and outreach programs that will target these 40,000 service members and then the almost 900,000 veterans and their families in this state, a huge audience. We want to get after this with this focal area. So that's one tool, that's a garage full of tools really that's at your disposal now that wasn't a year ago. And just quickly, the sort of flow chart on that, this is like many other program areas. We're going to be the connective tissue. That's the idea here between the associations, between faculty here, and then that dotted line relationship, which I think is important because we're directly affiliated, and I am a PI on one of the programs of the Military Families Learning Network. We also have a conduit or a pipeline right to that USDA DoD agreement. And I'll talk to you a little bit more about that. And that's something I hope you all will leverage in terms of programming and even in terms of some resources. I am mentioning this thing called Military Families Learning Network. What is it? I'm just going to give you the wave tops right now. This has been in existence for quite a while. It's a deliverable underneath that USDA Department of Defense Memorandum of Understanding. It's funded at about $1.8 million a year. And it includes these well-developed concentration areas you see on the right. Each one of those is hyperlinked. The first one is community capacity building, which is in my wheelhouse and exists here at Cornell. The other ones, family development, family transitions, military caregiving, network literacy, nutrition and wellness, and personal finance. Each one of these concentration areas is focused on a kind of train-the-trainer approach. So these concentration areas are focused in those targeted areas on helping military caregivers, people who work in that domain, get the educational resources they need from the cooperative extension system. So in each one of those concentration areas within this larger Military Families Learning Network, there are weekly webinars, weekly Zoom sessions. There are all kinds of resources being posted, all of which is built for you to take off the shelf, repackage however you'd like, and deploy in your context, in your county association. We want to make this a very, very easy sort of thing for people to be able to take advantage of. So that's the Military Families Learning Network, and I would encourage you to explore those concentration areas as you can. There is, as I said, there are in those offerings, the webinars do offer certificates of completion and continuing education credits if that's important to you. So that's important to point out. You can go to these upcoming webinars as a participant, or you can start becoming involved in these concentration areas within the Military Families Learning Network, which, by the way, is part of the larger e-extension universe. So there's all kinds of ways that could be beneficial to you. You can engage in the blogs, you can connect with the social media, follow, like, and so forth to hear about what's coming up next. And as I mentioned, there are podcasts and other sorts of things. There's also a Military Families Learning Network network news that you can subscribe to if you want to be kept up to speed. So that is a whole nother set of tools and resources for you as we're engaged in assembling our tools to be able to address this mission area.
So Keith, I'm just going to interrupt you
Sure.
for a minute if I can. Are you going to show some of these resources, like where they could be found on the actually show the websites? I'm thinking there's a lot of information there, and there may be some parts and pieces that are good to have people actually see.
How do I go back? One more slide. Let's see if we can, somebody asked about or mentioned parenting. So let's look at, will this go live?
Well, let's see. What are you seeing on your screen?
I'm still seeing.
Can you pull that over? There you go.
Okay.
Okay.
Outstanding. So here, if you're able to see this is, I appreciate the suggestion, Celeste. So here is this is the Military Families Learning Network Family Development splash page. And on this page, you can see that under Programming, Resources, Publications, and Meet Our Team here, there are all kinds of places you can click to go get tons of information. Let's go over here under recent posts. You can see there was a field talk Q&A with providers supporting military families. 7 ways to help young military connected children during stressful times. Stomping out the stigma, a look at equine assisted therapy and training. So a pretty diverse set of things going on there. And then under webinars, here's what's coming up if you wanted to join in and see what's up. Here's the buffer zone. What adverse childhood experiences study teaches about maximizing health and well-being? If you're a follower of this field, you know what ACE is. In October coming up, there's a webinar that I would encourage, When Play is More Than Just Playing, Delivering Intentional Instruction Through Daily Interactions, and so forth. That's just in family development. And also there is a Facebook page, a Twitter page. There's an active YouTube channel with lots of videos and so forth on it.
That's terrific. So you also mentioned like podcasts. So are they per topic area or?
Let's have a look. For family development under podcasts.
So I'm a person that likes to listen, right? So podcasts appeal to me and, probably lots of other people out there.
So here's a 7 episode series for those that like to listen, and I'm one of those too, especially in the car, on the Forward March, the journey from military to civilian life, okay? And then episode 6 was Private Parts, exploring intimacy issues with couples. All of this stuff. You can take these resources, for example, this podcast series, and you can basically, with your social media in your county association, link directly to this. This is yours.
That's really
this
an
is
easy
your
way
stuff.
to just get connected.
That's
too,
right.
So
That's
to
right.
push out individual pieces. That's great.
This is not a heavy lift for folks that are on this webinar. I mean, I think there's so much here that if you decide you want to do this and address this audience, there's enough here that all you really have to do is keep track of what's out there and keep passing it along so that the people in your communities have access to all this great information. And again, as I'll say at the end, I'm here to help you figure out how to do that as we move along.
Thank you for indulging me there.
No worries. And we could easily explore community capacity building as a concentration area. I don't think we need to take the time to do that now because I'm kind of hitting the wave tops of that. But if you're interested more in sort of this community capacity building notion, then you would click on here on this community capacity building concentration area, which I am the PI for. And so maybe of interest to some on this webinar, each of these concentration areas is distributed throughout the land grant system. So Cornell has community capacity building. Family development lives somewhere else. I think that might be Texas. I'm not positive. I know military caregiving is Texas. There's some at Purdue. They're scattered around, so you get the benefit of all the land grant system interacting with each other in order to build these resources. They're very high quality, evidence-based resources. I'm going to move on. And again, thanks, Celeste, for that suggestion. I think that's helpful for folks. There is another tool that's within this Military Family Learning Network that I really highly recommend. If you're interested in learning more about community capacity building, there is a community capacity building training that was built by this DoD USDA collaboration that we, the community capacity building concentration area, are in the process of disseminating. This is free training. It's 9 modules of training. Folks up there in Jefferson County have taken it. I know Mitch has for sure. I'm not sure if Casey has. Casey, you're welcome to chime in if you have and have any observations about it. But this training, each module you get a certificate of completion, and by the time you're done, it is not only helpful for thinking through how cooperative extension can engage the military, family, and veteran community. Mitch and others who have taken this training in the cooperative extension system have said it really helps them understand actually how to be more tuned into this notion of community capacity across the board as an extension educator or an extension system leader. So I strongly recommend this training. It is worth doing. You don't have to do it all at once. You can do it one module per week or however you want. And again, there are certificates for completion. And the links are there below. You see that hyperlink. Whenever you're ready to go give this a look, just click on that hyperlink and you can check it out. Okay, so we're still showing the big garage. I think it was Chase Pitkin that is probably no longer in business, but don't take that too literally. The big garage full of tools for folks. And here's another one. This is new. This is the Cornell Cooperative Extension Military Families and Veterans landing page. This is part of a larger Cornell-wide initiative to do more to directly engage veterans and military families as the land-grant university in the state of New York. And this website and these associated social media accounts is Cornell Cooperative Extension's contribution to that effort. So we have the website. We have, and I don't see the website actually listed here, so
I'm going to I'll put the link, I'll send the link out to everybody who's on today's webinar, but I'll also put it on the page that will have the recording of today's webinar.
You do see, for purposes of social media, that the Facebook handle there, it's CCE MilFam Vet, and on Twitter it's CCE Military, and those are active social media sites with great resources and things that are apropos not only in New York State but sort of more broadly or regionally. That again, we encourage you just to share those. If you even made a goal to say once a week we're going to share something from the military, families, and veterans universe, I think that would certainly be helpful to the communities in your areas of operations that are looking to cooperative extension to help them with community capacity building.
It feels like that's pretty low-hanging fruit too, given
Easy.
all these things in the garage.
Easy stuff. And then we do have a listserv, which is where, for internal purposes, where we're sharing more strategic stuff, giving heads up about things that folks might want to be aware of, or asking you questions, because this needs to be a very transparent sort of participatory process as we build this out. Now that we're sharing it out to you, we want your input, and the listserv is a great way to be involved. And also, as I mentioned, and I'll mention again in a few slides, that we want your involvement in our program work team as well. So we're now at the point in the webinar where we've learned the lingo, we've embraced the role, we've now assembled our tools. There's plenty there, and as Celeste says, there's some low-hanging fruit. It's easy to get going on this. What about locating your audience? How do you know who you're actually reaching out to, and what does that audience actually look like for your respective county or cooperative extension region or domain? So let's look at that a little bit. Remember this slide. Here we have a little closer look at where some of these installations are. I want to make sure that people are aware that some of these, whenever there's a major airport, it's likely that you have some Air Force, Air National Guard folks there. At each of those places and across the state, where we can see there's one there over near Buffalo, there's one over here near Syracuse, there's one in Rome, there's one over here near Schenectady, there's one here in Stewart, and so forth. Those places are going to have pretty significant staffing for morale and welfare. And that's people whose job it is to do basically what cooperative extension does, and that's connect people with the kinds of programmings that we're all familiar with. I know those folks would be very, very happy if cooperative extension walked in the door, shook their hand, and said, we're here to partner with you on some programming. So that is, for those of you around those areas, that is some seriously low-hanging fruit, and we're ready to help you with that. Then if you look at the other ones, these more green looking ones, those are all likely going to be armories where the National Guard drills or the Army Reserve drills or both, or even the Marine Corps reserves. Those also have those offices. They're not as well staffed in terms of morale and welfare and family programming, but they are great opportunities where people show up once a month for an entire weekend and look at the bulletin boards to find out what kind of program is available for them in their communities. I've done a little quick straw poll and done some on-the-ground surveying in some of these armories. I don't see a lot of cooperative extension information anywhere on those walls, and it's a really, really easy thing to get in there, and they want this information. So those are some very, very simple suggestions in terms of locating your audience, just in terms of posts and installations that are spread around in the domain of the Department of Military and Naval Affairs for New York State. Here is another interesting way to locate your audience. There is this program here in the Northeast Beginning Farmers Project, which is, in my mind, a sort of marquee program here coming out of Cornell Small Farms, where there are some regional folks involved. Now, what these people are doing, this is farmer-to-farmer learning for veterans, and they are doing a lot of programming through these regional networks. And in New York, you can see one of these persons might have changed. But Western New York, you've got Lynn. In Northern New York, you've got Kathy. In Eastern New York, Leora. Southern, Laura. And in Central, Dean. All these folks are already linked in to the sort of veteran farm community, which is a very vibrant area. If your ag program persons or ag educators aren't connected to this, they probably need to be, especially if you're interested in addressing this audience. Because there's some super exciting things going on here. And again, nobody needs to reinvent the wheel out in the associations. This stuff is ready to go. As long as it's part of your mission or what your goals are, we can certainly make this happen. So I want you to be aware of this if you're not aware of it already. Also, I want to encourage you and invite you to use me and this new Veterans Military Family Network and focal area. As I said, I'm a liaison to this USDA NIFA Military Families program with all of those resources that we were able to take a quick look at. I'm aware of and actually am hosting and looking to do more training opportunities in counties and in regions out there in New York State. And we have some existing high visibility, high impact programming that we're just looking for partners on. So I encourage you to use those tools that I said are new, and me personally, my phone, my email, to continue to work this area. And I'm happy to sit down with you on a phone call and brainstorm a little bit about what we can do in your county. And I do that frequently in Eden as well, and I'm happy to do that in this domain. So given that, in terms of locating the audience and thinking about how we might do it, let's go. What does it mean to actually do this? And let's just take a quick snapshot here as we begin to wrap this up and hopefully have some time left for some interaction and questions given what you've seen. What does it look like to do what these guys are doing? That's just to jump and make it happen. Well, I think we've got to break it down and be reasonable. First, crawl. I think the crawl step is to take that community capacity building training. I think another crawl step is to sort of get involved in a listserv, learn about what's out there, make a phone call to me, and get your legs under you. Then it's time to walk. Then at that point in the walk phase, I'd say that's when you want to be getting involved with these Military Family Learning Network webinars and chiming in their chat pods where there's a ton of information flying around, and on their blogs and with their social media, and then reflect that social media on your own county level or other social media outlets. And also look around your county. Reach out to local veteran groups. You've got Veterans of Foreign Wars, VFW, you got American Legion, you got AMVETS, plus you have those installations and posts, all of which are anxious to be connected up with Cornell Cooperative Extension, and we just need those warm handshakes to happen. When you're ready to run, I highly encourage you to work with Farm Ops to host a training in your county. You can work with me to explore some other options in the domain of how you can use outdoor recreation as a sort of reintegration opportunity for combat wounded veterans, which we have a large program in here at Cornell. And when you're ready to fly, then it's time to actually make sure that your county legislators and even state legislators know that you are relevant visible, and viable in your communities as it relates to addressing military families and veterans, and be able to showcase what you've done. And I'm looking forward to that day when lots of counties are doing this, starting with some of you, I hope. We also, as I've said a few times, we want you to help us with our program work team. This program work team was just stood up in this recent year now, and we want to populate it with people that are excited about this mission area and want to help grow the programming that we're going to be deploying. And we want to make this programming, as I said earlier, off the shelf, easy to use. I want you to see over and over again what Celeste just saw. Aha, that's so easy. That's low-hanging fruit. That's just too easy. Let's get that done. I need your help to do more of that, and you can help me with that by joining the program work team.
Can you talk a little bit more about that program work team? What would that involve if somebody was interested in getting involved?
Well, for now, because we're just starting it, it's not going to involve a huge time commitment. I think that's probably going to be, 2 to 3 meetings per calendar year, and then a little bit of homework on the side where we're basically brainstorming future directions. This is not, a big grant writing effort. In my mind, it needs to be collaborative space where we're working these ideas into truly programmatic boxes so that we can deploy the training.
And when you say meetings, are you thinking virtual meetings or face-to-face meetings, or maybe a combination?
It would be a combination. It would be mostly virtual with an annual sort of meeting either on campus or at Geneva or somewhere, probably rotated around the state, frankly, over the years. Most of the work would not require travel.
Any dates in the future?
We only have 2 people other than myself on the program work team at this time, but this webinar is a recruiting opportunity. No dates yet, but I would expect that once the fall starts, we'll have enough traction to get a date on the books.
Thank you.
Sorry, I don't have a date for you yet.
That's all right. No, I'm just curious.
Recently, at one of our training events, Julie Suarez, who's a good friend and a very strong ally of what we're doing with Eden and now this, encouraged us to be relevant as a system, as cooperative extension. And I have this sort of acronym that I use to check myself pretty much daily in terms of, what my activities are or what my group's activities are as it relates to extension activities and outreach. And if it doesn't meet these standards, I don't do it. If it won't be remembered as relevant and reliable, it's not really worth doing. If it's not evidence-based or empirical or can't be related to that, I'm not doing it. If it's not visible and viable and help the mission of cooperative extension, I'm not doing it. And if it's not valuable, I'm not doing it. So let's turn it to the other side. Let's not talk about what we're not doing. Let's talk about what we are doing. Every time we can check this box, we're in a good place when it comes to cooperative extension. And I feel that based on what I've just showed you, we can check this box aggressively, happily, with fervor in terms of being remembered, evidence-based, visible and viable, and valuable. So if you're interested in this sort of REV model as it relates to military families and veterans, I want to hear from you. And here's how you get a hold of me. Here's my email address. Here's that website, once again, to the new focal area for veterans and military families. I encourage you to ask questions. Don't worry if this feels overwhelming. As I said, we can start with the crawl. And at this point, that's all I have for you today. We have a few minutes left over for questions or comments. I'm watching the chat box, and Celeste, I'll turn it back over to you. Thank you. Thank you all for being here with me today.
Super. Thank you. It's fantastic. I love the visual of crawl, walk, run, fly, because I think that really does take it to the place of, there's always a lot of opportunity that can feel completely overwhelming, but when you poke on the low-hanging fruit first and then build some steam as you have other people in the community that want to work with you or have other ideas and grow capacity in that way. I think that's just a great visual and something for us to always remember. I always say Rome wasn't built in a day.
Right.
Everything I do today wasn't done yesterday, except maybe the laundry and the dishes, which have to be done every day in my house. But I think that, just remembering that there is something that we can do every day to push some important efforts forward is really great. So thank you. I'm going to invite those of you that are on to ask some questions, put some feedback in the chat. And while you're doing that, I'm going to open up their webpage just to share with you So give me a second here. Open this up and drag it over. Okay, so Keith, if you can just confirm for me, you're looking at that
I
page
am.
on your screen.
I see the
Okay.
staff site.
You know, anybody who's around me for, you know, even just I don't know, half an hour has heard me say that the staff site is kind of that's the bread and butter of what we do in a cooperative extension administration. Our audience is our staff that are out in the state, just like your audience are the people in your community. And the best way that we have of sharing resources with our audience is our website. So if you don't have the staff site as a homepage in your favorite browser, I would encourage you to do that. Sometimes there's information that's hard to find, but ask questions, and you know, we're constantly looking for ways of improving the content and the availability. All of the content that I have to offer in the Kim Fleming and Sarah Dayton and Escadar and Eduardo Gonzalez, it falls under the longest and not quite the last, and certainly not the least list here in units, but organizational development and accountability. And so everything is broken down into buckets that hopefully will feel relatively useful and relevant to you. But what I want to point out right now is that Campus County Connections link. So the series of webinars that we do, including this one, get posted up here, and all of the upcoming webinars are listed here. Keith had mentioned upcoming webinar about the Eden Project that I really can't call it a project, it's really a program. And with every webinar that's up and coming, there'll be more details and content as we get closer, along with pictures. The webinar connection link is there, a way to register. This is also on the front page of our staff site, but as things are recorded, those recordings end up getting posted there to the left. You'll see the resources that are relative, the webinar recording, and any content that may seem useful. And all of the recordings are in YouTube. So the one negative about our staff site is it is on the staff server, which means that you have to be logged in or VPN'd in if you're from home or an alternate site in order to get to the content. But the webinars are on YouTube. So if you have a partner in your community that you think would benefit from seeing this recording or other recordings, you can send them the link to the recording specifically directly from YouTube. So just want to put a plug in for up and coming opportunities that are you know, on the Campus County Connection webinar list, or also Keith mentioned program work teams. You know, talk about lingo. In cooperative extension, we have a lot of acronyms and lingo that get thrown around, and I'm often reminded that not everybody knows what a PWT is, but program work teams, if you're not involved in one, are a fantastic way to meet staff and faculty that are interested in the same topical areas that you are. Oftentimes our program work teams work together collectively, whether it's writing a proposal for a grant or a project, or supporting each other in asking questions about, you know, meaty topics that are important to them that other colleagues would have information about. So helping you know that you're not alone out there and working collectively to really get things done out there in our communities. So, you know, there's links here to the program work teams, funded research and extension projects. So a lot of these links people don't always see. So I just want to point them out. That the thing that makes cooperative extension so unique is our connection between campus work and county work that is happening. So I encourage you, and if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. The link that's here to CC Organizational Development will come to me, as well as just reaching me directly. It's Celeste Carmichael, CJC 17 at cornell.edu. So I'm not seeing any questions come through on the chat, but I really thank you for your time here. Keith, do you have any other closing thoughts or suggestions?
Just that I appreciate very much what all of you do. I appreciate that you were here today because you're interested in this audience. And I hope you share or have come to see how you might be able to develop a real passion for this audience. I think it's a great way for us to be revved up, relevant and viable. And please hit me up with any questions. I'm happy to work with you. I look forward to working with you.
All right. With that, we're going to wrap it up. Thanks so much, folks. Thanks, Keith.